Hello, my name is Caitlyn, and welcome to my presentation on Stupendemys geographica, which was the largest freshwater turtle to ever exist. So they are from the class Reptilia, which are exothermic amniotes that lay eggs with a shell, and so it's just all reptiles. They are also from the order Testudines, which is the order of all turtles, and it means reptiles that have a shell, which is called a carapace. It is bony in this species, and it develops from the ribs. Next, it's from the suborder Pleurodura, which means side-neck turtles. They can retract their heads into their shell by bending their neck to the side. They're from the family Podocynimidae, which are aquatic turtles whose pelvis is fused to the shell, and they often live in South America. They are from the subfamily Erminochelinae, and these types of turtles tend to have a large skull and originated in Africa, so their ancestors came from Africa. The binomial species name is Stupendemys geographica, and it means stupendous turtle. So the genus Stupendemys is a combination of the word stupendous because of its large side and emys, E-M-Y-S, which is the Latin name for freshwater turtle. And the species epithet geographica is to honor the National Geographic Society. So for horizon locality, specimens have been found throughout South America in places such as Colombia, Brazil, and Venezuela. The first fossil was found by Robert Wood in 1976 and it was from the Uramaco Formation in the northwest Venezuela. And this here is a photo of the researchers from the Cadena group who discovered the largest ever fossil of this species in 2020. So this is the phylogenetic tree, and as you can see, like right here, this is Stupendemys geographica, and this is where it is on the tree. So you can see that it's part of the Podocynimidae here, and then it's also within this subgroup here. And in this graphic, they have it branching off from the rest of the Erminochelinae group over here. And so there's this transition right here. And so it's almost an outgroup to the rest of this group. So S. geographica lived during the middle to late Miocene in South America. Fossil species have been found in places like Colombia, Brazil, and Venezuela. So specifically, specimens have been found in the Uramaco Formation in northwestern Venezuela, which is where the first original fossils found, and the Tatacoa Desert in Colombia, which was where the most recent specimens of the species have been found. During the Miocene, much of South America was covered in extensive freshwater wetlands, which was an ideal habitat for Stupendemys geographica. The habitat at this time is what supported the giant size of the species and other animals due to a combination of effects like temperature, which led to a higher mean annual temperature, which is correlated with large body size. It is still debated exactly why, but most likely due to turtles and reptiles being ectothermic and water temperatures being better supporting their temperature regulation, and warmer temperature supports lots of food sources for them. Large habitat size supports a lot of food sources and space, and this allows for large individual home ranges and large species distribution, which would all lead to increased size in the animals. And also pressure from large predators would lead to larger size in the species. So its main predator were giant crocodilians, and um, their large sizes were influenced by the pressure of this predation. Um, and so this here is a map of what it's kind of a prediction of what they think South America might have looked like at this time. So over here is the Euromako formation here. Yeah, and here are some deserts, and these are where a couple different of the fossils have been found. So for ecological and biological information, they were estimated to have lived up to 110 years old. The longest shell ever found was 286 centimeters in the parasagittal straight carapace length. So that's the length of just the shell, not including its head, kind of going down the middle here. And they estimated that it would have weighed about 1,145 kilograms. So for its reproduction, it would have had very similar reproduction or same reproduction as most other reptiles. So that would mean internal fertilization, polyandry, which means multiple male matings for every male would have multiple females that they every female would mate with multiple different males at one mating period. So multiple males per every one female. They were amniotes and therefore have shells, have eggs that have shells, and the females would dig nests in sand or soil, and sex determination is dependent on temperature. So their diet is predicted based on its jaw shape. So researchers would have thought that they mainly had a durophagous diet, which would mean it was made up of like shellfish, like crustaceans, mollusks, and then they'd also eat things such as fish, small caiman, snakes, and sometimes fruit. And this was largely determined because they had a large mouth surface for grinding and a large main adductor tendon, which is associated with powerful jaws. Yeah, and this is a nice image to show that kind of the size difference between what an average sized human would look like compared to this turtle. So for key synapomorphies, so for the turtle compared to other pleurodires, it had structural articulation of the pelvis with the shell, well-developed anal notch, fusion of the guilers, which refers to the scutes on the bottom of the turtle's shell. It formed central articulations of the cervical vertebrate, well-developed processes, and loss of the mesoplastra, which are the medial shell bones. Some autapomorphies. Some main ones included ones with the skull, so they would have their surface for grinding, which is what triturating means. So it would be mainly for like crushing food, and so that's formed by the premaxillae. And then they would also have contact between the maxillae, between them, and it would be medial contact, so it would be through the middle. And their palatimes would form a secondary plate within their skull, and they also had an extremely inflated snout, which was formed by the prefrontals. They also had formed nasal passages and a striated skull roof. Some other autapomorphies were in the lower jaw. So you would see their deep oval surface that was for the grinding and crushing of food. They would have like kind of a beak. They would have a blunt lingual ridge and a high cornicoid process. And that is associated with having a strong bite force, so that also supports um, their diet of mainly crushing foods. Um, and also, we would see otapomorphies within their carapace, so it would be low arched, they would have these irregular nodules that you can kind of see along, not super well since this is a fossil, but they would have kind of these nodulars around the shell. They had thickened bones, and then on the males, they would actually have a horned shell, which is a form of sexual dimorphism, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. Um, they also had um, like a smooth, striated, or pitted dorsal bone. They had scaled posterior peripheral bones, and they had long and wide vertebral scutes, which are kind of their scales on their shell or plates on their shell. And so for the key plesiomorphes, we saw that they would have large post-orbital bones and reduced cheeks. So these are kind of also in their skull. Um, and it would mean that they would have kind of like non-hollowed out cheeks in their face. They would have an overhang of prefrontals, laterally facing orbits, which is to do with where their eye sockets were, interparietal scutes, and they would have a cranial pit and a pinched snout. So for the phylogenetic and evolutionary importance, we wouldn't consider this to be a transitional fossil. It is a member of a Pleurodira or a Podonimidae and an Ermosynomydidae, but there isn't really any evidence to show that it's a transition group between any of these other groups. None of like the research papers really mentioned it being a transitional group compared to like other species within the course that we have been talking about as like a transitional group, so it's not really considered to be that. And so in some phylogenetic trees, it is seen as a branch separate from the rest of the Ermonomysidae group, and you can see that a couple slides back, but it's not considered to be a true outgroup. So why should we care about this fossil? It helps to create insight in past climate, ecological interactions, and ecosystems. For example, the habitat in which it thrived, the food it ate, and its predators. It is also helpful to understand how and why it got so big and the factors that led to its giganticism and other species' giganticism at the same time. It also helped to understand how other side-necked turtles evolved and any key synapomorphies between them. Other species that belong within the group, such as like the group of Pleurodira, which is all the side-necked turtles, those are within the same group. Most side-necked turtles are actually extinct today, but there are still some extant species. Some closely related species include all of these that I have listed here. So all of these ones, they're pretty closely related. And also their closest living relative is the Amazon river turtle, which is this turtle here. And this one's actually also a side-necked turtle. Yeah, and this here is an image of the Stupendemys geographica compared to other turtles around the same time, other large turtles. So it is the largest freshwater turtle, and there is only one other turtle species that is larger than it, and that one is a sea turtle. And so some interesting facts include due to its large size and diet, it would have the potential to swallow large fruits whole, and it would be a seed disperser um, within the South American Miocene wetlands. And another interesting fact is that um, the males all had these horned shells, which was a form of sexual dimorphism. And so they were often used for competing with other males, for access to females, for like mating rituals. And they were also used as defense, as there has been some evidence of finding like giant crocodilian teeth embedded within the carapace of the Stupendemys geographica. Um, yeah, and so these shells are only found on the males, and they kind of, this turtle here, it doesn't have any of the horns as it would have been a female, but they're kind of near the front of the shell so that when they're fighting, they'd be a pretty effective tool for competing with other males. And so these are my references, and thank you so much for listening.